Hello and welcome to the Irish NFL Show. My name is Kieran O'Donovan and I'm truly honoured to be joined today by four-time Super Bowl champion. You heard it right, four-time Super Bowl champion, member of the Pittsburgh Steelers Hall of Honor, Rocky Bleier. Rocky, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure. My pleasure. Well, all the way across the Atlantic. So anyway, to be over in Ireland. Go, yes.
Rocky, we're going to get, I'm so excited to get into your story. But before we do, I just want to touch on global football and the Global Ireland Football Tournament, which we're only 2 weeks away from. We were lucky to have Patrick Steenburge, the founder of Global Football, on our show just a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about this amazing event. So our global football, is returning to Ireland for the 6th edition from August 21st to August 22nd in a couple of weeks' time. And they're bringing the Hun School from New Jersey to take on the NFL Academy from the UK at 3 p.m. in Energia Park, followed by the Ireland Under-19 Wolfhounds versus the Kiski School from Pennsylvania, Western PA at 6:30 p.m. So it's a really exciting event to look forward to, and obviously it takes place in the run up to the Kansas State versus Iowa State Aer Lingus College Football Classic. But there's a whole lot to look forward to throughout this weekend. So can you give me a little bit of a background? I know you've been an ambassador for global football, and can you give us a little bit of a background about what these kind of events and what these tournaments mean to all involved?
I think this is the 12th anniversary or since of global football. And the great thing about Patrick and being involved in this and kind of bringing American football to Ireland and to Europe specifically I think he's done a wonderful job. But more importantly, it's really the awareness of the game and the national exposure of the game. And one way of being able to do that, obviously, is to get people involved and students involved, young kids involved in the game. And it's like starting anything new, it has to crawl before it can run. And so it's gotten to that point from the excitement. Now, the teams that are coming in, the Kiski area team that's coming from Pittsburgh is a well-known team in this area, high quality, football. And to be able to, there's two things here. One, to be able to expand the experience. And I think this is at the experience for a player to be able to play on an international basis, to go to Ireland and to compete. And not only do that, make some friends against guys that you're playing with who have the same interest but to help create an awareness for the game of football. As much as we love it, it is now getting into the younger minds over these 12 years, this kind of competition. And to be involved in it has become very exciting for me just because of that. It's opportunities to learn about the game. It's opportunities to learn about yourself. It's something about playing in a team sport, give and take, win or lose, whatever it might be. But those are all life experiences. And so I'm very happy to be a part of what Patrick has created in that experience for those young players in Ireland, and then to have this competition, and then for the players here and the students here to be able to take that trip and to go across seas and see on an international basis, other teams and other kids that are same age and compete. So these will be lifelong experiences that will, make a difference in some of the kids' lives and forever be able to share it. So that's the excitement about being involved.
Yeah, and Patrick mentioned, the type of experiences, the cultural experiences that they want to give to these American kids when they come over and really make it, as you said, a lifelong memorable experience for the American kids. From an Irish perspective, you're so right. Sport and the development about sport is all about grassroots level. And not only is this an opportunity for people to head down to Energia Park on the day and see American football for a really reasonable price, 20 euro a ticket and 10 euro for students. to see the game of American football up close and personal. We have to say American football because we've got Gaelic football here in Ireland as well.
Right.
Not just to see it, but in the run-up as well, they're also offering coaching clinics, and people can come along free of charge and literally, do maybe some kicking drills. And they're bringing over some really experienced coaches to do some hands-on work with kids. I mean, by the time I started becoming interested in American football, it was too late for me to have any aspirations of ever playing the sport. But there's a lot of kids around Dublin and further afield who I'm sure would love to come along and have a go and just to whet their appetite a little bit.
And you're right, and I think that this kind of exposure in getting them on a story, being a part of a story, being part of a team that's competing against the American football guys that are coming over is very important. And so I'm very proud of what Patrick has accomplished and where this has grown over the years and the people involved for the Ireland Irish people to become more involved of a sport that's taking place over here, but it becomes important, and so I'm very proud to be involved with that.
Yeah, and for the first time, I think we've got two Irish players in the NFL now, and Charlie Smith and now Mark McNamee. Two people who are two Irish players who have developed through these programs like the Leader Kicking program here in Ireland. So it really does show that there are opportunities now internationally. It's not just a pipe dream to think that a young child could grow up and have aspirations to head across the Atlantic and carve out a career. So anyone who's looking to come along and who's looking to get involved in the event, globalfootball.com, that's where you can head for all of your information. So it really does promise to be a wonderful event. So moving on to yourself, Rocky, and I look, we spoke a little bit before we recorded, and I let you in on a bit of a secret that I'm a bit starstruck here today, because I mentioned Irish coverage or international coverage of the game has only grown in the last 10-15 years. So I've been an NFL fan, right? I could properly say I've been an NFL fan since about 2013, but I've said it on our show a few times. What really, I suppose, cultivated my fascination with the sport was looking back through NFL films and through the archives and at shows like America's Game and A Football Life. And I think the further back you go, I think the more fascinating the stories become, because you get such a mix. Look, the players nowadays, they're on such another, they're in another world. It's hard to relate to these guys now making their millions and millions and living in their mansions. But as you go back, they're fascinating for so many reasons. I mean, in some ways, you've got relatable stories. Like I remember your teammates, Joe Green, telling a story about landing in New Orleans for the '74 Super Bowl, and you guys just dropped the bags and went out in the town, to the extent that the late Dwight White, member of the Steel Curtain, went out, and they ate so much shrimp and so much bad shrimp that Dwight White ended up in hospital. He lost so much weight, lost about 20 pounds, and spent the week in hospital, and then suited up for the Super Bowl and scored the first points on a safety. It's such a human, relatable story on one level. So they're really anecdotal, really enjoyable. Something that very few of us and almost nobody can relate to is your story and your introduction to the NFL, because you were drafted in 1968. You were drafted by the NFL, and in the same year you were drafted again. Second time round was not such a pleasant experience, I can imagine. You were drafted to go to Vietnam and fight as a soldier on the ground in Vietnam. I mean, that is, where do you even start, or to contemplate something like that? I think you were about 11 games into the 68 season when that happened. So what was that like, getting that devastating news?
Well, it was one, sometimes it's hard to relate to the story because you got to go back to the time and what was taking place back in the latter part of the 60s with Vietnam, moving forward from 66 to 67 to 68. By 68, it was kind of the height of the war. We had more troops over there than before. We had 500,000 troops in that area, and so it was being protested. Student bodies around the country were against the war, and so all of a sudden you were identified with that war rather than serving your country as it is today, no matter where it might be. But it's like, okay, fine. The draft was the draft happened here. So as the story goes, and just very briefly, it was like I was in training camp, was the end of training camp, and I get a letter in the mail. It was my 1A classification from a student deferment. Now I'm eligible for the draft. And I took it to the Steelers and said, I got this in the mails or something you could do. Part of it, you could join the reserve or the National Guard. And they said, yeah, we'll take care of that for you. Well, time went on. All of a sudden, I hadn't heard anything, and the season goes on, and we're having our problems, basically. General retired, the congressman got defeated, all our contacts people were out. And so it was one of those situations where I fell through the crack and I got my draft notification to go to the armed services. Now, I could have enlisted, and spent 3 years in the service and picked, or be drafted and spend 2 years in the service. And so I had things to do. I mean, I needed to play football. So I thought, well, we get this over with, and I took 2 years. But then it was like everybody else. So your life was turned up. I got drafted, went to basic training, went to advanced infantry training, as everybody else did, got my orders, and my orders were to report to Vietnam. Like thousands of other young guys. And so, boom, all of a sudden I'm over in Vietnam. And so our experience over there was I was with the AmeriCal Division, 196th Brigade, 4th of the 31st Infantry, Charlie Company, 1st Platoon. We were up north in the I Corps. And so there was a lot of activity. And anyway, after about 4 months in country, was in August. We were out on patrol, and we ran into an ambush, and we were under heavy fire. And so my responsibility in the field was I carried an M79 grenade launcher, so one shot deal. And so, so we were walking out on an open race paddy. All of a sudden, our point man hollers gook, gook, and shots broke the stillness. And they started to run. He started chasing, pulling everybody out in the middle of the race paddy. And all of a sudden, machine guns started to level the area. We jumped into the race paddies to the left of us. I crawled on my hands and knees to the end of that race paddy, found another one lying below us. 4 guys were pinned down. And so my responsibility was to get some firepower onto that machine gun nest. And I rolled over on my side and breached my grenade. And I felt the thud in my left leg, and I got shot for the first time that day. So I discharged my rounds. We were in a firefight, and then we crawled back into some more coverage, and they followed us. And I'm all of there, and all of a sudden I see a grenade come flying through the air, and that grenade hits my commanding officer, who was right next to me on the middle of the back, bounces off, rolls between my feet, and before I can jump out of the way, it blows up through my lower legs and my feet. So again, we're in another firefight till a sister platoon fought its way down and kind of dragged us out of there and got to secured area, got to helicopters. Anyway, so as time goes on, I got, patched up and spent the remaining part of my career attached to the hospital somewhere, and gone through 3 operations and rehab, and And then I got out of the service. So I got out of the service, and things started to heal, and I was starting to work out because my focus was to come back and play football, and people say, well, why or how did you do that? Or, well, the thing about it, I think playing sports, I don't care what it is. Whether you're playing rugby or you're playing soccer or you're playing football or you're just living life as a kid, you get bumps and bruises. Okay.
Mhm.
I mean, you'll fall down, you might break a finger, you might sprain an ankle, you got a pulled muscle here. And so on, all these little lessons that you learn is that in what happens, well, in time they heal, and what? You're back out playing again in the backyard or the groups and so on. And so that was kind of my set. I hadn't lost a limb damage, but hey, we've been there before. So 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 I went back to training camp, and they invited me back to training camp. And so the big break comes because of ownership, so Mr. Rooney, ultimately Dan Rooney, the son of Art, who was then general manager, I got cut that first year when I came back. Chuck Noll said, why don't you go do what's necessary, come back next year and get yourself. So Dan talked to him and said, no, I mean, if he served our country, we'll give him, have our doctors take a look at him and so on. And so they bought me a year, and I had another operation and came back the following year. And I made the taxi squad, the developmental squad, kind of just hanging around. But they bought me 2 years to heal, get bigger and stronger. But you have to do something with that. So I worked out and I lifted and I started getting bigger and better, faster, trying to, improve my game. And I came back in 1972 again, and I made the team. But the interesting thing in that standards was in the exhibition season. So I was the leading ground gainer for the team in the exhibition season, which would happen to be 6 games at that time. So good enough to make the team, as I tell people. And so never carried the ball that whole season, and played special teams. And so came back the following year, a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger, again, leading ground gainer during the exhibition season, got to make that team, carried the ball once during that season. But in our development, no matter what we may do, there's always questions, you're working hard, are you ever going to get a break? And all of a sudden I thought maybe my life's going in another direction. I mean, I came back and I tried to make the team, and I made the team, and I got a chance to play, maybe not to the level I thought, but that wasn't part of the deal, so I left the Steelers after the 73 season.
I wasn't aware of that.
I came back, I had 5 years. They gave me credit for the seasons I missed. So towards my retirement, it was 5 years. And I thought maybe my life's going in another direction at that time. And then ultimately I got those little instances in our life, and I got a call from a teammate of mine, Andy Russell, who has passed away. But Andy, I was living in Chicago, and he was coming in, and as the story goes, and he said, let's get together. I haven't seen you since the end of the season, blah, blah, blah. And then I said, well, thank you. But I declined because I'm not going back. He pushed, I declined some more. Then he asked me that question, why? And the only thing I blurted out was, well, I quit. I'm not coming back. And he said, you can't quit. He said, if you quit, think about it. What you've done is you've already made a decision for that coaching staff. Do you like them well enough to make decisions for them? He said, no, your responsibility, if this is what you want to do, you come back and you make them make a decision. You back them. You give them every reason to either keep you or release you. You don't cut yourself. Well, the reality is, game is we're all expendable. We all can be cut at any time. And I thought it was just the arm twisting I needed. And I went back, and everything I perceived did take place. I had a fight with every free agent, draft choice, and rookie once again to be able to make the team. Leading ground gainer again. Now, I tell you that the reason I was the leading ground gainer wasn't because of the fact I was the biggest, better, faster than all the other running backs. It was a simple fact that I played more than anybody else during the exhibition season. I carried the ball more than anybody else. Given those two simple statistics, I better be the leading ground gainer, because all they were trying to provide was what? An opportunity. And so then they had to keep me. And as I tell people, I was the 5th running back out of 4. Playing special teams once again. When unbeknownst to us, Franco Harris, our starting fullback, gets hurt. The backup becomes the starter. I become the backup to the backup. Wow, we've never been there before. So with renewed vigor, played that second game, third game, fourth game, the backup gets hurt. And I'm inserted into the game as a fullback, along with my running mate, Preston Pearson. He finished a career with the Dallas Cowboys. But I tell you this only because he broke one 43 yards down the sideline, scored, gave us a lead. We go into halftime, go over assignments, adjustments. Who's going to start the second half? I thought to myself, maybe those guys that got you the lead in the first half. And so Preston and I get to start the second half. And as a team, we win that game. Following week, everybody's still banged up. Preston and I get to start. And as a team, we win that game. And the week thereafter, it's a Monday night game, an extra day of healing. Franco now becomes healthy. And, well, anyway, I thought, well, at least I had a chance to play, show, prove what I could do. And we had our pregame meal. And we go over assignments, adjustments, and as we were leaving that to go out of the field, Dick Hoke, our backfield coach, said, Rock, you and Franco will start tonight. Momentarily, I was quite confused. I didn't know how we both could play the same position at the same time. When it dawned on me, I was going to play the fullback position, as I had been, we played the other running back position. And the reason was Chuck Knoll went to our backfield coach, said, we have a weakness in the backfield. Who is your best blocker? And he said, Bleier. He said, then start him. One talent. And I tell people that because sometimes we get confused about what we can offer or not offer. And we question our own abilities. But when we have to really look at is the strengths and the weaknesses that we bring to a business, to an organization, to a team, because we all have those in our lives. Yeah. We all have strengths and we all have weaknesses. And so I got a chance to start, and we won that game. And we started that whole second part of the season, and we win we win the conference, go to the playoffs, win the playoffs, go to the Super Bowl, and we win the Super Bowl, and we play 6 more years together. So it's little things.
As they say, the rest is history. Then I mean that's the point where I guess people are familiar with that famous backfield of yourself and Franco Harris, but you filled in a whole lot of blanks there as to the grueling process that it took to get to that point. And I again, like looking back on the through the archives, I've seen Joe Green and I've seen Mel Blount full of praise for you and what you put your body through just to give yourself that chance that you spoke about. I know Joe Green is documented as saying he entered the gym several times and he saw you were purple from head to toe, beat up, banged, bruised, and he himself was wondering, why is Rocky doing that? I mean, why is Rocky doing this to himself? I mean, what hope does he think he has? But you go on, to become an integral part of, in my opinion, the greatest dynasty in football history. I mean, just looking down through the list of players that you played with, I mean, Franco Harris, who you mentioned, Terry Bradshaw, Jack Lambert, Mike Webster. I think at one point you played in the Super Bowl with nine Hall of Famers that were drafted and developed by the Rooney family and Chuck Knoll. So, like, you went in and when you were drafted initially by the Steelers were not a winning organization. They were not recognized as a winning team. In fact, it was almost the opposite. They were one of the worst franchises in history. Let's put it plainly. And again, another guy that I'm really high on, Chuck Knoll. Watched his Football Life documentary so many times, and again, you featured in that and in the promotion of his book by Michael McCambridge, His Life's Work. And again, you've told some fantastic stories about Chuck Knoll. you said it yourself. Chuck was matter of fact. Chuck wasn't the one who said, "Oh, Rocky must be in the team because he served his country." It was either you're either good enough or you're not. Okay,
Correct.
and in a very competitive environment, you became an integral part of that backfield with Hall of Famer Franco Harris. So you must have been doing something that said Chuck, that led Chuck Noll to say, "Well, no, Rocky needs to be here." And you had some splash plays, a lot of splash plays. You mentioned blocking. I think you provided a really key block for a long Lynn Swan touchdown. I think it was the 75 Super Bowl. And then you had that high point catch in the 78 Super Bowl in your breakout year where you had 6 touchdowns through the season. And I've seen your friend and teammate Randy Grossman make fun of the fact that maybe you didn't jump quite as high as the photographs suggest. But the photographs remind me of Dwight Clark and the catch in the 81 season. So like, when you look back at that era, what stands out? You must look back at that era, that dynasty, with such fondness. Is there anything in particular that stands out to you, as part of that journey where I mean, 4 Super Bowls is absolutely incredible. And, in between those years, you were unlucky with injuries and you were unlucky with certain circumstances not to win more.
But the success, I think the success of those years in the development of people was Chuck. It was Chuck Noll. Chuck came in, as and I tell the story because it was pretty. I remember his first day of training camp when he first came in, and he said this to the team. He said, over the last 5 months that I've been your new head coach, I've watched every film of every practice of every game that you've played in over the last 3 years. And I can tell you why you've been losing. Because you're just not any good. You have no discipline, you have no techniques. And by the time this training camp is over with, many of you might not be here. Not that you're not good people, you're all good people, just not made a commitment to get any better. You've not made a commitment to raise the standard. You've not made a commitment to excellence. And so that's what Chuck brought. He brought the basic fundamentals. He wasn't a rah-rah kind of a coach, but he was a pretty forward, straight kind of guy. If he had a problem with you, it would be off to the side. He would take you aside or have a meeting with you specifically, never in front of the other players. And so I think that as players, you kind of appreciate that, not that you're called out all the time. And then there's sometimes when you need to be called out, and we all understand that. But and then the development of the draft and of the guys that we started to build with Joe Green in 1969, and as a first round draft choice, and then the following year we get Terry Bradshaw and Mel Blount in the draft, and quarterback. And then Terry was a, golly gee, all-American kind of a quarterback out of Louisiana Tech, but he had to learn the game. He had to learn how to take advantage of the strengths that he had. I mean, he could throw a football 80 to 100 yards, boom. I mean, he could throw it down but you had to learn how to, hand off and call the right plays and all that kind of stuff. It was really an interesting growth period to see the development of players, and not necessarily all the Hall of Famers, but the guys that we played with as well, and they made up the rest of that defensive line. L.C. Greenwood and Dwight White were impactful players and were a big part of the reason the success. Joe Green just can't do it by himself. Lambert can't do it by himself. So you need, these other people that ultimately rose to the occasion and get recognized for their contribution. So it was a wonderful opportunity. Who knew that was going to take place? Just to be there at the right place at the right time and to find a way to win and win games. We had some bad games, at times. But overall, when you look at the body of work, as they say, Chuck really had an impact on the development of those teams working together and the respect that we had. Now, also, in team organization, you need you need to be self-disciplined by other players. Okay. So the coaches aren't always going to scream at you. Peer pressure becomes very important, and so you have leaders, to be able to say, hey, you're really screwing up. We don't like that around here, or we don't do that. And one of the major moves in that regard was Jack Lambert. Jack ultimately is, the impact that he had, because Jack, I mean, he played the game 100%, but he wasn't afraid to tell you if you were screwing up, that he would get in your face and say, we don't do that here. So, and that becomes peer pressure. And so, you don't want that. So we've had all those things kind of develop during that period of time because of the players that we had. And so it turns out, get lucky and win the right games.
Yeah, the perfect concoction, and I think that I agree with you so much. You need those type of players. You need every kind of player. You need cool heads and calm heads, but you need, every now and again, you need someone to take somebody by the scruff of the neck and say, look, this isn't good enough. And I think again, I credit good coaching with allowing that to happen, and that being a reflection of a good coach. Even in bringing in the right kind of people who are going to take that responsibility. I'd also credit, and I'd assume you'd give a lot of credit to the Rooney family and how they, I guess, gave Chuck the autonomy to make those decisions, and they were a very integral part of that draft and development process as well. And like you can see in this, in the culture that was built by the Rooney family and the Steelers. I mean, Mike Tomlin is only the second coach since Chuck Noll, and that reflects a lot of loyalty, a lot of trust, and right. Again, it speaks to the kind of family culture that's created in Pittsburgh around the team. What's your level of engagement with the Steelers today? I mean, look. You're looking at the Steelers now. It's 2008 since they won a Super Bowl, 2010 since they represented since they were represented in a Super Bowl, since they played in a Super Bowl. Again, Mike Tomlin is one of the most respected coaches in the league. However, he's kind of coming under increasing pressure every year now because they're getting to the playoffs, but they're not getting any further. What's the mood like in Pittsburgh at the moment?
So what happens is that I'm like everybody. I have an opinion as a fan. I'm just I'm not around the team. I don't go. I don't hang around. But But people ask questions. So what do you think? Okay, so there is all right. Something has to be done. I mean, something has to be done. And so the big controversy over now that we're going through is quarterbacks. Since. And it's just, so now we got Aaron Rodgers. Okay, so that becomes the focal point, Aaron Rodgers. And my question is, why? As a fan, okay, fine. Aaron Rodgers, why? I mean, he's 41 years old or something. He's been around. Okay, he signed a 1-year contract, maybe 2, but a 1-year contract. Made that statement. I guess this was going to be his last year. He's not going to take this team to the Super Bowl. I mean, so all of a sudden you get this kind of a player coming in, and all the controversy is around him. Now, if they happen to go to the Super Bowl, then that was the smartest move that the Steelers had ever made in their lives, to be able to get him and so on. I don't think that's going to happen. Okay, so given the status of the team. Okay, so Mason Rudolph, they re-signed. Mason had been here before. Mason's a good quarterback, is a good, but to make a good quarterback, you need an offensive line, you need a defense, you need a team around you to be able to move it forward. And one person's not going to do that. So I don't see that as an answer to any of the questions that they had. So, and it's like TJ Watt, who was a linebacker that they re-signed. Okay, he's in his 9th season. Oh, And he's a wonderful player, and he's an impactful player, and he's made a difference on that defense. But he's not the defense. He's not going to get you to the Super Bowl. He's not going to get you. So he's at a prime time when you hate to do it, but maybe you should have traded him and get a value for him, get some people coming in, whatever the choices are at that time, because that one person is anyway. So that needs to be, but they didn't, and they have him coming back. So that whole, it just, you go like, okay, Tomlin's been a good coach, but he's a 500 coach, right in the middle. He might win, gets into the playoffs, a wild card, and he loses the first game, but he's never had a losing season over all these years. Well,
the word purgatory gets thrown around a lot, because it's like you're not good enough to. You're not bad enough to get high draft picks, and then you're not good enough to progress to that level. So, it might be one of the hardest places in the league to get yourself out of. And I agree with a lot of what you're saying. Now, look, you can see behind me, I have a lot of Green Bay paraphernalia behind me. So, I'm a Packers fan, so I'm a longtime Aaron Rodgers fan. But I agree with you. I don't necessarily think he's the answer, but maybe they see more talent coming in the quarterback class next year. But one thing,
see, they get there, they got to lose 15 games.
Yeah, but I believe it's a deep quarterback class. That's the only thing, that they might get one later in the first round, or maybe trade up. I don't know.
I don't know.
One thing is for sure, Rocky, is that the likes of Aaron Rodgers and TJ Watt, they're going to be a huge draw for the fans in Dublin when they come here in the end of September.
They come, that's right.
And I'm excited to see them. Excited to see them bring the Vikings. And the Rooney family, we mentioned them. They trace their roots back to I think it's County Monaghan. Going back to the famine when their family immigrated, and how fitting it is that it's the Rooney family and Pittsburgh that become the first home team in an NFL game to be hosted in Dublin. Right. I'm sure you're aware they were here in 1997 for a preseason game. They played the Chicago Bears, and there's a great story that Coach Bill Cowher always tells about the fact that it was a preseason game, and so as in modern day preseason games, very few of the starters get risked. And I think it was Patricia Rooney, the wife of Dan Rooney. She saw that the sponsors of the game were putting up a Waterford Crystal, a local company. They made a crystal trophy, and she said to Dan that she really loved that trophy in the trophy cabinet. So I think Dan Rooney had a word with Bill Cowher, and next thing you know, a lot of the starters were installed, and Pittsburgh went out and made sure that they won that game. How excited are fans in Pittsburgh at the thought of coming to Ireland and being that unique team that's the first home team in an Irish NFL game?
They're excited. I and I'm only one, but the number of people that have called me to say, can you get me tickets for the Ireland game? Can you call us? Can you get me this? Can you give me that? So the enthusiasm for going to Dublin to play is extraordinary from my point of view. People are going over, making a week of it, making a vacation of it, or being over for the weekend, and so it'll be a great experience, for everybody and that.
Yeah, we look forward to it, and I know you were hoping to be over for the Global Ireland Football Tournament. I know you've got prior engagements, but we look forward to that as well. Listen, Rocky, it's been an absolute pleasure. I could carry on. We could speak easily for another hour, but I'm reaching my time limit here. But look, what an honor, as I said, to get to speak to you. Thanks so much for coming on.
Same here.
Once again, we look forward to Global Ireland Football Tournament, and again, globalfootball.com for anybody who's looking for information on that event. Rocky, it's been a pleasure. I hope we can chat again someday.
I hope so too. Keep it in mind. We'll do that anytime.
Thanks, Rocky.
Thank you.